Okay, let's get some of the takeaways, your impressions. Firstly, I want to begin with China's Vice Premier's statements in Davos on its record trade surplus, saying that China is, quote, willing and wants to be the world's factory and the world's market. Explain in detail for us why that is so important right now.
Right. So I think Vice Premier He Lifeng had made really important points in his speech. So for one, I think it's very well emphasized is that the China's development is through its reform and opening and innovations. It's not about the so-called unfair trade practices or government subsidies. And second, I think he really emphasized the fact that China is not just a world factory, but it's also a growing and vibrant market, that China is more than willing to open the markets to import more. And I think that is important. And as he emphasizes also that China is more than willing to import, but some countries do not want to sell. So I think that is a very clear but indirect way, right, to really point out the difficulties in the global trading system, which is the pan-securitization of the normal trading relations. Now, going back to your question, I think it is in China's interest to increase import, right? Because that is helpful to boost domestic consumption and help to lift domestic living standards. Now, that said, I think the difficulty, as he also explained, is that now a lot of consumption in China tilts towards service. And service a lot of times are difficult, right, through trade, right, through sort of digital delivery or any other means of trade. And he mentioned that China is actually recording, trade deficits in services, but China never complained about that. Right. So I think the message is clear that China is making a lot of efforts to increase the market access of foreign companies and to increase imports, but that has nothing to do with any ill intention on China's part to sort of, as others, accuse China of doing, which is sort of taking advantage of the global trading system for its own benefit, but not really benefiting other countries.
Yeah, I think those are some very good points. Also recently, a few months ago, the World Bank saying that China is poised to become a service-oriented market, which could be very important as well. And also so many nations that are at odds with the U.S. could have a very favorable landing spot with China as well. It's usually warm handshakes, pats on the back, but man, Trump's Greenland plan taking center stage at the World Economic Forum. What are other world leaders prepared to do to push back? We've said this before, but it looks like this time world leaders are really ready to push back against the U.S. and U.S. President Trump.
I agree with you. I think at this WEF meeting, as you see from many European leaders, also Canadian Prime Minister, I think they are quite united, at least in the rhetoric, right? That this idea of territorial integrity is non-negotiable, according to the EU Commission van der Leyen. And I think that's clear that, the European countries would stand together and try to safeguard the interests of Greenland as well as Denmark. Now, that said, I think it's still quite unclear exactly what European countries are prepared to do when it comes to, for example, Trump's threat of 10% of tariff on these 8 countries effective February the 1st. And that would escalate to 25% in June the 1st. Some countries, especially like France, they're advocating really strong pushback, for example, using the anti-coercion measures as an instrument, as the reporter talked about. But there are other countries like Ireland, the Netherlands, and also Italy. They're still quite hesitant. So they're really sort of advocating for more negotiations and talks. And van der Leyen, I think she also clearly talked about this idea that we need to increase investments in Greenland and to build sort of shared interest in security in Greenland, and also promote this concept of common security. But she said very little about the concrete measures when it comes to this kind of tariff threat.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody's looking for with Trump's appearance tomorrow, because the U.S. president shows absolutely no sign of backing down. Now, if not, what will the host of political leaders and executives have to say other than economic pushback? What can they do?
Well, again, I think from the indications so far, I think they're still trying to negotiate with Trump. They're still trying to find ways to talk about this common security, this common investments in Greenland in terms of infrastructure to boost its economy, its security, and so on. I don't think at this point, again, they have a clear idea exactly, through economic measures or any sort of other measures, right? They're talking about NATO is at stake, but at the same time, I think the Europeans wanted to defend NATO as an organization more than the United States appears to do. So I think they're still
Yeah.
not quite clear what exact actions that can be taken, that will be undertaken. At the same time, I think there was a lot of, again, sort of negotiations back and forth. And I think, even for Trump, if there is some guarantee, right, from the European leaders that they will beef up and double down on security measures around Greenland and allow the United States to participate a lot more in terms of, mineral extractions and so on and so forth, whether or not that will be able to calm the water. And by the way, according to a CNN survey, 75% of Americans actually are against the kind of annexation. So it would, it remains to be seen, right, how Trump may or may not, chicken out again this time.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if blunt language really confronts him face to face. But getting back to Davos, we have such a wealth disparity, not only in the United States, but globally as well. So I want to get your opinion. Is Davos significant, or is it simply now a landing place for a fleet of private aircraft, the uber wealthy, and posturing politicians out of touch with the common person?
Right. So I really think this is a forum where, you get about 3,000 participants, 60 states of the countries, and also many of the finance ministers, the world bankers, and so on and so forth, and many, CEOs. I think this has become really a forum where political leaders and also industry, elites, corporate leaders come together to sort of share some concerns or talk about the bigger, broader, abstract sort of cooperation and other issues. So in that sense, I think it's limited in its usefulness. And I think it's interesting that Larry Fink, who is now the interim co-chair of WEF, had talked about reforms, right? That talked about this needs to be more inclusive, it needs to be less of the echo chamber, it needs to be talking about more concrete ways of cooperation. But that said, I think this is a forum where you can see, what these global trends and also these influences of these top thinkers and leaders are going to shape the world, in the coming years. So I think in that sense, it's still a important meeting, at least, for the spirit of dialogue, right? As the theme of this year's WEF talked about, at least a forum to talk about the potential corporations in a very contested world.
Yeah.